With The Holdovers, director Alexander Payne set out to make the film that he would have made had he been directing in the 70s. Set at Barton, an all-boys boarding school in small-town Massachusetts during the winter of 1970 to 1971, The Holdovers is a heartwarming coming-of-age story that follows a rowdy and rebellious teenager whose white male angst comes up against the socio-political turmoil of his time. In other words, the prototypical New Hollywood film. Ambitious. Payne told Town and Country, "The feeling that I was looking for was that it's not a period film. I mean, it is a period film, but I didn't want it to feel like one designed by people now. We see a lot of period movies and TV shows, and they're just too damn designed. They're too period. They almost rub your noses in how period they are. This had to feel as banal and lived in as if we were making a low-budget film then." Payne makes decisions, which we'll take a closer look at in this essay, that serve this goal of reproducing a 70s indie darling. There are plenty of interviews of Payne waxing poetic about this ambition. And there's no shortage of reviews from audiences reaffirming that he did indeed make a convincing American New Wave replica. My question is, are audiences parroting this because he said so and therefore it must be true? Or does the movie actually live up to these claims? When I watched The Holdovers a couple years ago with my best friend, I left the theater feeling confused at the disconnect between our experience and the rest of the audience's. I sat with it for a while until the film's Oscar buzz led me to question my initial unfavorable response. I felt like I needed to interrogate why I didn't like the movie and why I was at odds with my fellow audience members. When I looked into criticism, I was hard-pressed to find anyone actually talking about and looking at the film in a way that didn't feel like they were explicitly looking for confirmation of Payne's talking points. I personally had no reason to believe or not believe Payne. What I did have was an indecipherable feeling that something wasn't adding up. With all of these questions, I did what any reasonable person would do. I watched it again with my wife, confirmed for myself that there was something to investigate, and started a YouTube channel. The first stop in my search for answers was Alexander Payne himself. In multiple interviews, he mentions a list of movies that he had Dominic Sessa watch in order to prepare for his film debut as Angus Tully. Watching these films was genuinely a treat, and I gathered that he's into humanist films that are very much about outsiders, as well as character-driven adventures about connection. Perhaps more salient was the fact that these films all have a distinct perspective. The funny thing is, this perspective is perhaps the single most crucial element missing in his movie for me. Some filmmakers fall into this trap of creating a film whose whole is less than the sum of its parts, despite having extensive lists of impressive filmic references. Unfortunately, the lists themselves can't manifest a film with a sense of direction. With this in mind, let's traverse through Payne's references as well as some films that I think were able to successfully achieve what The Holdovers failed to. But first, we need to review what The Holdovers is and is trying to do. The film opens up during the final days of classes before holiday break, where Payne establishes Tully as the class loser for reasons which are lost on me. I honestly couldn't tell you 5 things about his personality or his interests, besides the fact that he's a smartass.
Getting into new material now, right before break? Honestly, it's a little absurd. Absurd.
We learn early on that he has a strained relationship with his family and thus is angsty and kind of an asshole. But he's also a white American teenage boy, so this doesn't really tell me anything about him. The winter plans he's been bragging about get taken away, and we're left with a small group of boys who are also holding over. We spend 45 minutes getting semi-introduced to what could have been an entertaining meditation on the dynamics between young boys, and perhaps a film where his aspirations of charm, whimsy, and heart would have actually been realized. Instead, a helicopter arrives, takes all the boys save for Angus on a ski trip, and we're abruptly dropped into an entirely different movie, with 90 minutes left to go. We're now meant to follow a curmudgeonly teacher named Paul, our closed-off junior, Tully, a grieving cafeteria manager named Mary, and an often forgotten custodian named Danny. Once our cast of characters is narrowed down to these four, the expectation is that we're to receive sharp storytelling and filmmaking that exposes something poignant about the characters and their respective backgrounds within this moment in history. Set in a boarding school, class is perhaps the film's foremost theme, and yet the mishandling of this material is one of my topmost grievances. Payne is no stranger to dipping his toes into subjects to which he has little of substance to add. This tendency of his plagued his previous film Downsizing, which also felt like it was multiple films jammed into one. A feeling echoed by Richard Bordy, who opens his review of the film for The New Yorker with, "Downsizing is 3 movies in one. A passable one, a terrific one, and a terrible one. They're unified in the realization of the movie's big idea, but the movie's straining after a big idea is its overarching weakness." Admittedly, I haven't seen all of Payne's films, but this statement certainly applies to the majority of the ones I have seen. By his own admission, Payne's films are often too long. In an interview with Collider, he says,
"Yeah, I think Election's pretty good. It's the only feature I've made that's not too long. All the other movies I made at some point are just a little bit too long in a way I couldn't avoid during post. But Election has a very good metronome to it."
His ability to self-reflect here is interesting given how committed he is to not editing down his script or the duration of his films. There's a scene towards the end of the movie where the gang is setting off fireworks in the kitchen after finally having some real fun together, and it fades to black and you could nearly believe it was over. I knew it couldn't be, nor would it have made a good ending, but I felt almost relieved watching them fade away. The following belabored conclusion tacks on an additional 30 minutes with little payoff. To return to Richard Brody's review for a moment, he writes, "The movie circles around from its end to sting the very notion of downsizing humans to protect the environment, a setup that wastes effort and resources on replicating the world as it is and perpetuating its unrelieved political ills instead of changing society and remedying those ills. Yet the movie does so in a way that is itself resolutely personal and conspicuously apolitical." I mean, this may very well be the entire thesis for Gen X white liberalism, but it is also true of Payne's approach to filmmaking as a whole. In The Holdovers, for example, Mary Lamb, the cafeteria manager played by Divine Joy Randolph, is introduced to us during the school's memorial service for her late son, Curtis Ezra Lamb, who had previously attended Barton on scholarship. We find out that he was killed in Vietnam, and as the film takes us through the campus, its administration, and its student body, it's clear that he was an outlier among his mostly well-to-do peers. Later in the film, we learn that this working-class background is shared by Paul Hunham, played by Paul Giamatti, who was also a scholarship kid during his time at Barton. His brush with the academic elite was cut short when he was later expelled from Harvard for being falsely accused of plagiarizing by a legacy student. This ends up being the source of his punitive behavior toward his privileged students. Despite its over 2-hour runtime, The Holdovers doesn't really have anything to say about class. While it acknowledges the hardships that may befall working-class people at the hands of the economic elite, Payne's characters can only exist as victims of their own misfortune. Mr. Hunham spends the majority of the film resentful and self-torturing, and like many of Payne's characters before him, is directionless, stripped of ambition, cynical, and against the world. Mary Lamb, a working-class black woman and a bereft mother, is only allowed by the script to offer up advice about changing his attitude.
You can't even dream a whole dream, can you?
There's no camaraderie over their shared position in society, and this is likely due to the fact that Alexander Payne and writer David Hemingson have seemingly zero concept of what this could mean. Their inability to see working class people as anything other than victims is not only patronizing, but is also emblematic of apolitical middle-class pseudo-progressive ideology, a common export of the intelligentsia class. The film's performative and cynical attitude might have something to do with the fact that it was both written and performed by Yale legacy admits, ironically enough. Paul Giamatti's father, Angelo Bartlett Giamatti, was a Yale University professor who later became the literal president of Yale. During his tenure as president, he became a tangible symbol of Yale's resistance to negotiations during the clerical strike of 1984 to 85, and arrested protesters calling for Yale's divestment from apartheid South Africa the following year, a legacy that Yale and its fellow Ivies have continued. In the midst of these shameful administrative incompetencies, his son Paul was admitted to the undergraduate program. I wonder if Paul attended those protests. Giamatti now holds a BA and MFA from Yale, and in 2023 was awarded an honorary PhD, also from, you guessed it, Yale. Also, screenwriter David Hemingson and Paul Giamatti's respective fathers were friends while students at Yale. I'm unsure of why someone would write a character so burdened by the consequences of others' nepotism specifically for a Nepo baby to perform. The Holdovers was being produced during the first peak of Nepo baby discourse, and nepotism is a theme in the film, yet Payne and Hemingson again offer us nothing of value. Hunnam's monologue in the liquor store on the injustices of Nepo babies was honestly hard to take seriously.
That blue-blooded prick's family had allies on the faculty. I mean, their last name is on a library, for Christ's sake. Are we really supposed to let these boys just skate by as long as Daddy builds a new gymnasium?
Giamatti's performance was not strong enough to outweigh the fact that neither the filmmaker, the writer, nor the actor have any legitimate experience with being in this position. I kept asking myself how he could even deliver those lines knowing that they may as well be about him. This lack of authenticity is prevalent in all of their attempts at social critique, which we'll continue to break down in this essay. Hal Ashby's 1973 film, The Last Detail, is something of a 70s odyssey. It follows two sailors in the Navy, Bodusky and Mulhall, played by Jack Nicholson and Otis Young respectively, who have to escort a naive 18-year-old Meadows, played by Randy Quaid, up the east coast of the United States. They make this journey from Virginia to Maine because Meadows has been sentenced to 8 years in prison for a $40 theft. Of Payne's references, The Holdovers follows this film's narrative premise the closest. In the preface to the new edition of the novel, The Last Detail, author Daryl Ponnickson says this of why he was so drawn to the story. The military puts you in a place where all things are possible, and not in a good way. I listen to the old salt talk about the detail, at times fall off the seat funny, at other times hopelessly sad. My writer's radar pinged. The story was perfect. A messed up kid who didn't want to be trouble for anybody, put into the hands of two lifers, torn between a keen sense of duty and a mission they knew was wrong, between mild contempt for the kid and a begrudging affection. As soon as I could find a place and some moments to be alone, I started writing it down. Before publishing his debut novel, Ponnickson worked as a high school English teacher in Owego, New York, and a social worker in Los Angeles. This experience working with vulnerable and blue-collar communities must have informed his point of view, and supports a richer and more compassionate story. Ponnickson's journey is evidence of the fact that participation in the quotidian proves indispensable when creating works that engage in social critique. I don't know how true to the novel the film is, but the film is quite heartbreaking. Bodusky, like the typical Nicholson character, is larger than life.
I am a badass. Yeah, what? You're a badass. A what? A badass. A what?
Nevertheless, the Navy owns his time. It's made apparent to us throughout the entire film that he's a lifer, meaning that he's a part of this institution until he's of retirement age. Post-World War II and throughout the Korean and Vietnam Wars, these institutions and the notion of just following orders were being brought into question. Budusky faces the contradictions in the choice between a sense of duty to your life's work and your own humanity head on. It's quite powerful to see the ways in which these two obligations are in opposition to one another. These contradictions are not only central to the film's themes, but are also intrinsic to our everyday lives. Ponickson affirms these connections in his preface, saying, "I'm a veteran of the war in Vietnam, according to the motorcycle club that not long ago took me in, but I had been with the 6th Fleet and never fired a shot in anger during the war. I was hardly aware of the war until I became a student at Cornell, when it became hard to turn your awareness to anything else. In Los Angeles, I became part of the anti-war protest. Though it is not a theme in the last detail, the Vietnam War is on every page." Ashby's naturalistic approach allows us a proximity to these characters. When questioned by Columbia Pictures about the overuse of profanity, a record 65 fucks, the highest ever at the time, Robert Towne, the film screenwriter, said, "This is the way people talk when they're powerless to act. They bitch." This naturalism extended to the film's shooting as well. According to Nick Dawson's biography, Being Hal Ashby, Ashby's company made the same journey Budusky and Mulhall took as they gave Meadows a taste of the good life before his internment, traveling from Virginia up the East Coast to New Hampshire and taking in Washington, D.C., New York, and Boston on the way. The film enmeshes you with the trio. Not unlike The Holdovers, it's shot plainly, in natural light, and in real locations. Perhaps one of the most noticeable atmospheric details was how cold they were. Our sailors spend the entire film shivering, hands in their pockets, and this relentless, painful cold serves as a reflection of the harsh conditions of their work. These techniques come together to create a cinematic experience which invites the viewer to meet these characters unburdened by preconceptions and to find pieces of our own lives in theirs. Ashby's attitude toward these characters goes beyond relatability, and he creates a film whose essence is a practice in empathy. Dawson notes, talking about Towne's protagonists, Ashby said, "There's no way I could ever relate to what they're doing with their lives, but I would never take cheap shots at them. His experiences at Puget Sound Naval Academy and the ideologies he had acquired since then made him naturally prejudiced against hardened Navy lifers like Budusky and Mulhall, but his attempts to understand and sympathize with them brought him closer to the material and arguably took him to a higher level as a director." The Holdovers tries to appropriate these naturalistic techniques, but does so in service of nothing. The backdrop of New England winter feels more like set decoration. Nobody seems cold. Nobody is wearing ear-covering hats, gloves, or scarves, and they're just walking around in chukka boots. Despite being brought along on Tully's journey, much in the same way we are with Budusky, Mulhall, and Meadows, the Holdovers reeks of self-importance and pretension. Where Ashby sets himself aside, Payne and co. are unable to do so. And as a result, the film lacks any genuine sincerity and its critiques fall flat.
The world doesn't make sense anymore. It's on fire. The rich don't give a shit. Poor kids are cannon fodder, integrity's a punchline. Trust is just a name on a bank.
You can say these things, but at the end of the day, if your film doesn't really deal with any of it, then your movie is doomed to feel empty. Hal Ashby's 1970 directorial debut, The Landlord, eschews the naturalism of his later work for an experimental and energetic foray into the race and class divide of New York City. Despite this departure in form and tone, Alexander Payne mentioned this movie as a reference multiple times on the Holdovers' press tour. The Landlord delves into the life of a wealthy, unemployed 29-year-old Long Islander, Elgar Enders, played by Beau Bridges, who lives with his family and then decides to run away from home by buying a brownstone in the historically black neighborhood of Park Slope, Brooklyn. This was by far my favorite of Hal Ashby's first 4 films. Though the film takes on a much more poetic and experiential form, the script remains grounded in the real dialogue of working-class black people in Brooklyn. I'd assumed Ashby wrote it himself because it was his first feature, but as it turns out, it was actually written by Bill Gunn, who famously went on to write and direct Ganja and Hess. Gunn's script deftly navigates the tension between and complexities of its characters, and although Elgar is ostensibly the protagonist, the movie doesn't default to operating from his perspective. The black characters in The Landlord don't exist to help Elgar grow. They don't pity him, and because of this, we see real character development. These tenants are portrayed as existing outside the bounds of Elgar's interactions with them, and allowing them their own worlds to inhabit is why they're so much more than one-dimensional stereotypes. To be quite honest, the white guy in this movie is written with more nuance than any one character in The Holdovers. He was written so truthfully that he's nearly identical to one of my ex-boyfriends. Elgar also doesn't pity his tenants, and in him, Gunn is able to craft a character who isn't just a racist and wealthy stereotype, nor is he a white savior. Elgar very clearly goes into his real estate endeavor as naive, carefree, and ultimately destructive, and that's what's truly horrifying about him, and what makes him an insightful depiction of the way white people move through the world. I think there's a lot more to be said about how this movie relates to issues around gentrification, colonization, the housing crisis, and a myriad of other issues that feel so relevant to us today. I want to keep talking about this movie, but this essay isn't about The Landlord. I won't spoil it too much more, but I highly, highly, highly recommend this one because it blew me away. The Holdovers, on the other hand, takes none of the effervescence nor the honest and nuanced portrayals of blackness from The Landlord. Case in point, Divine Joy Randolph's character, Mary Lamb. When I initially wrote this essay, Randolph had just won her first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. While I think this was a monumental achievement for her career, and I don't want to downplay that, I was not convinced by her character. Nor do I feel I should comment on her performance, considering the material she was given. Payne told the LA Times that she was cast after he saw her performance in Dolemite Is My Name, which was also written and directed by a team of white guys and barely qualifies as a movie. Though a more entertaining watch than The Holdovers, Randolph's character in this film was, unfortunately, once again, a one-dimensional stereotype, this time as a loud and proud protege to Eddie Murphy's Dolemite. Admittedly, these are the only 2 roles of hers I've seen, but it's disheartening to watch her portray such flat, spiritless caricatures. I hope that I get to see her perform more complex and nuanced roles in the future. The Holdovers' Mary Lamb is much the same. She epitomizes the stereotype of the strong and silent black woman who unendingly absorbs until she literally bursts. Her climactic scene offers little payoff, and moments later she's back to lecturing Paul.
You don't tell a boy that's been left behind at Christmas that you're aching to cut him loose, that nobody wants him? What the fuck is wrong with you?
It's made clear throughout the film that Mary only exists to the extent that she furthers Paul and Tully's growth. At the holiday party where she dissolves into tears, Paul only wants to leave because he's embarrassed about his illusions toward Miss Crane. Meanwhile, Tully doesn't even want to leave because he's too busy flirting with her niece, and neither of these wants have anything to do with Mary or her grief.
I don't need you feeling sorry for me. See?
I'm just saying, this was the first good thing that came with being in this prison with you.
In fact, the movie barely scratches the surface when it comes to Mary's grief. Her paltry screen time is filled mostly with chastising Paul.
Okay, well, it is the holidays, so, go easy on them.
Oh, please.
You told the boy anything, so take the kid to Boston.
Overall, Paul and Mary's relationship never feels fleshed out. During the scenes where they're watching the Newlywed Game, it feels like they're on a first date, albeit a bad one. Her pointed jabs and emotional frankness are the first moments of breaking through Paul's self-centered persona. Let me be clear, I'm not suggesting that the movie needed a romantic subplot, but the script does little more with their relationship than these scenes. Their immaterial connection is exemplified when Paul gifts her meditations, which he compares to the Bible, says that the best part is that there's no mention of God, and then proceeds to gift this to a grieving Christian woman. I recognize that within the film, this gesture was meant to expose Paul's inability to step outside of himself, but we as an audience don't even know what would have been a better gift for her or Tully. Compare this to Mary's gift, a leather-bound notebook for his monograph. Like with so many mediocre films, her character exists to handhold the two leads, and she functions as the endlessly giving mother to both of them. At no point in the film do Paul or Tully do anything as selfless, present, or at the very least helpful for Mary. Even the gesture of bringing her to visit her pregnant sister was just a pit stop on their way to Boston. According to an article in Vanity Fair, Mary was loosely based on Hemingson's mother and the socioeconomic divides he witnessed as a child. He says, "I'm not old enough to have been in the Vietnam War, obviously, but all the guys that I knew growing up, their brothers or uncles, a lot of them had gone, and I noticed it was mostly poor kids and black kids who were going. You see it, and you see the systemic issues and the injustice, and I started thinking what it would be like for my mom, who loved me so ferociously, to lose me. So I channeled that." Hemingson's presumption here and lack of self-awareness honestly left me speechless. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know what he thought he was doing with this writing exercise, but it reminds me of Dana Schutz's Emmett Till painting from the Whitney back in 2017. I just can't imagine being like, wow, my mom loves me so much. Imagine if I was a poor black kid who died in Vietnam and how much that would suck for her. What is that? Oh, and also, Danny, the custodial worker played by Naeem Garcia, whom we know literally nothing about, has apparently been here the entire time.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, Danny.
Beyond its narrative structure, The Holdovers maintains its attempt at passing itself off as a genuine 70s film. It opens with convincingly period versions of the studio logos, designed by Nate Carlson, and the trailer heavily featured a characteristically 70s whip zoom, which was the primary reason I went to see the film in theaters. These anachronistic visual flourishes proved to be a false promise and made the opening scene all the more disappointing when it was obviously not shot on film. A realization I had immediately as someone who has primarily shot on film for over 15 years. One of the hardest things for me to believe has been general audience's acceptance that this may as well have been a movie made in the 70s and then put in a vault for 50-something years.
And I think you were going for this, but I really felt like the film was shot in the 70s and just disappeared in a vault, and then I just watched it.
And the result is this beautiful time capsule of a film that looks like it was hidden away for decades, dusted off, and presented now for the first time.
The thing is, in order to even claim that it looks as though it was shot in the 70s, one would have to watch films made in the 70s. And upon watching those films, people who care enough to even comment on this in the first place should be able to distinguish them. According to cinematographer Eigil Brield, the decision to shoot digitally was due to COVID-era supply chain issues and the fact that they would still need to manipulate the film image to match the 70s look they were going for. Digital or not, I'm not saying The Holdovers is poorly shot. Considering that Brield's work on Ocean's 8 is some of the most unfortunate looking cinematography I've seen in my entire life, The Holdovers is a capably photographed film. It has its moments of style, but fails to be especially striking or unique. This only becomes an issue when the rest of the film does very little to make up for it, a problem eluded by his inspirations. Another period detail that felt distractingly absent in The Holdovers was accent, as Dominic Sessa and Paul Giamatti were very much speaking in their normal voices. Watching all these 70s movies, the difference in cadence was glaring, much like when you watch a 90s movie and just know that people don't speak like that anymore.
Man, this old man driving to town from San Antonio, like this old man about 40 or 50 years old, going about 100 miles an hour down the freeway, waving a gun at people, laughing.
Divine Joy Randolph has said that she worked on an accent, and while I appreciate that she clearly had a Massachusetts twang,
What spiritual goals are we talking about? You go to church?
it didn't necessarily sound 1970s. The Holdovers isn't the first picture that's tried to authentically recreate a previous decade. Another of Payne's references, and one of my favorite movies, Peter Bogdanovich's 1973 masterpiece, Paper Moon, successfully takes me back to Depression-era Hollywood talkies. Paper Moon is a road comedy that takes place in 1936 throughout the Midwest when conman Moses Prey, played by Ryan O'Neal, gets stuck with his past lover's 8-year-old, too-smart-for-her-own good daughter, Addie Loggins, played by O'Neal's real-life daughter, Tatum. He agrees to take her from Kansas to Missouri, and obviously along the way, hijinks ensue. As the duo grow closer, they start running cons together, and along their adventures, they form a ragtag team of down-and-outs in Dust Bowl-era America.
The deepest form of connection that two people can truly have is when you are in cahoots with another person. When you are in cahoots with another person, it's not just like, my life is connected to your life. It is our lives are connected to something larger, the larger plan.
Paper Moon, like the 30s movies it alludes to, confronts the adversity faced by its characters through the language of social realism, which MoMA describes as a movement that flourished between the two world wars in response to the social and political turmoil and hardships of the period. Artists turned to realism as a way of making art easily accessible and legible to the wider public, often portraying their subjects, including well-known figures and anonymous everyday workers, as heroic symbols of persistence and strength in the face of adversity. Through their work, they aimed to call attention to the declining conditions of the poor and working classes, and to challenge the governmental and social systems they held responsible. Paper Moon is breathtaking. It's the rare example of a film that can walk the fine line between sappy and sentimental. It elegantly wields the raw emotion inherent in its story, and refuses to stoop to lazy filmmaking reliant on trite melodrama. Bogdanovich takes us door to door, giving us a glimpse into the lives and homes of Americans across socioeconomic strata, while our protagonists go through their own series of highs and lows during what's already a very painful period of American history. Addie, of course, manages to save Moses, Imogene, and herself, and in subverting her position of helpless, orphaned 8-year-old girl, becomes the quintessential social realist hero. Paper Moon isn't necessarily less predictable than The Holdovers. We arrive teary-eyed, but unsurprised, when Addie chooses Moses in its saccharine end. Yet, the strength of the writing and their two performances make apparent that these two people must be connected somehow, because they see themselves in each other. In The Holdovers, the plot plows forward towards an obvious conclusion, but everything that unfolds feels like an obligation to get us to an end where Paul Hunnam needs to give us something selfless. All of its sentimentality feels like plot requirement and not an earned emotional connection between characters who've been through something together. For all its cinematic ambition, Paper Moon is, at its heart, a story about finding family. Addie, Moses, and Imogene all need each other to escape their individual hardships. And it's only through this mutual cooperation and recognition of their shared positions that it's possible. Bogdanovich harnesses the full power of movie magic to construct a picture so pure of heart, witty, timeless, and most of all, gorgeous. Cinematographer Laszlo Kovacs's sparse yet rich frames are sublime. He employs period-appropriate deep-focus cinematography to tremendous effect. To call it gorgeous feels like an understatement. This is a film that is impeccably crafted, and worth a watch if even just for Madeline Kahn's monologue as Trixie Delight, or the long take in the car with Moses and Addie. What a picture. everyone had some version of a 1930s accent. Throughout the Holdovers' press tour, Payne offered several insights into his filmmaking philosophy.
The two most important components are screenplay and casting. And as Antonioni used to say, you figure out where the actors really would, where those people really would go, and then you make a documentary about it, a well-shot documentary.
I think he's interested in making something raw, but if this is the basis of your storytelling approach, then your script and cast have to be excellent, and this just isn't the case with the Holdovers. Its two leads are given the insurmountable task of elevating an already cheap and cloying script, but their stilted, mediocre performances offer no reprieve. Paul Giamatti is a reliable enough actor, and he never took me out of a scene. But his performance ultimately did nothing to add dimension to a character and script that desperately needed it. In reality, the success of the Holdovers falls squarely on Dominic Sessa's shoulders. As a complete unknown, plucked from obscurity by Payne, who happened to be location scouting at his high school, Sessa was in way over his head. For the record, I don't believe the Holdovers' script could have been saved by any actor, but Payne would have needed to find a generational talent to make something out of his movie. Payne put Sessa in an unfair position, asking a young green actor to carry this film while being unable to direct him into rising to the occasion. This is most evident in the climactic slow zoom monologue to Paul, where Sessa's awkward and stilted performance is immediately juxtaposed with a much more dynamic response from Giamatti.
You lost my dad.
Woogie, woogie, woogie.
Tully is given so many lines in this film that are honestly cringe-inducing.
They're your mother's pants. Tell her thanks for the good times.
It's candy cane. Touche, sir. Touche. See, when you say it that way, and throw in some pornography, it's a lot easier to understand.
I don't know if Payne and Hemingson were intentionally going for a Coen Brothers-esque heightened reality with Tully's rhetorical inclinations, but it clashes with the film's otherwise banal, naturalistic approach. And we don't know enough about his character to definitively understand where it's coming from. Tully even comes close to giving us an iconic, long-lasting line with,
"This is the most bullshit ever."
But he's not a strong enough character, and The Holdovers is not a good enough movie to actually make it stick. Honestly, I love when a character, especially a teen character, speaks unrealistically. Clueless is one of my favorite movies of all time, and my wife and I genuinely love Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. The dialogue in these movies is so fun, is handled masterfully, and works in harmony with the rest of the film. Because we understand these characters, we get why they talk like this, and because we get why they talk like this, we have a deeper understanding of their characters. Though not one of Payne's references, a movie that begs comparison with The Holdovers is Richard Ayoade's 2010 film, Submarine. Both follow troublemaker prep school leads in a sincere homage to a previous era of film history. Set in Wales, Submarine centers on 15-year-old Oliver Tate, played by Craig Roberts, who's honestly kind of a little freak. He's obsessed with his parents' sex life and is always reimagining his own life as though it were his eventual biopic. Submarine is unabashed in its tribute to 60s new wave and teen cinema. It wears its references on its sleeve, and it's kind of a miracle that the movie even works, because it seems like it's just gonna be bad twee Tumblr mood board material. With its use of handheld Super 8 memory sequences, Polaroid first kisses, cigarette-smoking teenagers, non-diegetic collages, setting things on fire, new wave fourth wall breaks, lens flares, close-ups, and quick cuts, the list goes on and on. Yet, Ayoade masterfully handles his layers of cinematic quotations to deliver something that, in lesser hands, would have been far more inelegant. Beyond its visual language, Submarine continues to successfully adopt and subvert cliché. I'd go so far as to say that it should be the teen film of this millennium. It's not just a film about getting the girl, Jordana Bevan played by Jasmine Page. It's a film about all the ways he selfishly loses the girl. During the movie, there are points where Oliver says and does things that honestly make him unlikable. He epitomizes the self-important teenager that most people are at one point in their lives. It's Oliver's world. We're just living in it. Oliver does not act like your normal teenager. I don't imagine you relate to breaking up with your girlfriend whose mother has cancer because you're too busy spying on your own mom's secret affair with a mystic. Usually I'm hesitant to praise relatability for the sake of it in movies, but Ayawade takes advantage of these far-fetched scenarios to foster a kind of relatability that is much truer to how it feels to be a teenager. He pulls it off in no small part because Oliver has overwhelming charm, charisma, and a pureness about him.
Don't ask how, just know that I'm now more powerful than ever. Why don't you go fuck yourself? Fucking big gay.
All of which Craig Roberts performs to perfection, bringing even more depth and humor to an already densely written character. Above all, every element here from script and cinematography to casting, wardrobe, and editing is handled with style. Meanwhile, every moment of flourish in the Holdovers, the aforementioned whip zoom included, feels at odds with the rest of the film, but also like a conceited and unearned attempt from Payne to show off what he thinks he knows. Sorry for honing in on this whip zoom, but it and its preceding shots are glaring examples of Payne's disingenuous use of these outmoded cinematic techniques. Within the span of 1 minute, we're awkwardly wiping to Paul buying a Christmas tree, then we're in this bizarre Dutch angle with Mary and Paul in the kitchen, and then we're zooming out on him calling Tully. I practically got whiplash from watching all of these in sequence. There's a low-budget campiness to these techniques that I think deserves respect. According to technical film and TV for non-technical people, back in the 1960s, when zoom lenses came into wide usage, the sudden zooming shot, known as a crash zoom, was often used to show a character's shock or surprise or realization. Nowadays, the effect is considered dated, especially when it is used to parody the earlier style.
Sometimes I wish there was a film crew following my every move. I imagine the camera craning up as I walk away. But unless things improve, the biopic of my life will only have the budget for a zoom out.
One technique that was implemented effectively was the use of dissolves. Payne mused to the New York Times, "One thing is going away, another thing is coming in. I can't explain it, but there's something poetic and melancholy about it." Despite their having fallen out of favor, I believe they should be reconsidered as a legitimate form in contemporary filmmaking. As they say, if you can't solve it, dissolve it. The Holdovers perfectly encapsulates how an over-reliance on your references can be your undoing. I'll definitely write at length on this phenomenon in the future, but for now, let me just say if I'd made the Holdovers, I wouldn't be directing people to these movies. Though I didn't write on every movie Payne listed, every single one does something, or perhaps everything, better. I was especially impressed by Hal Ashby's work. I'd only ever seen Harold and Maude before writing this essay, but after watching his first 4 films, I understand why he's such a staple of New Hollywood cinema. Ashby had a penchant for distilling politically charged material through deeply personal stories without resorting to being didactic. Of course, Ashby is not the sole reason his movies were so transcendent. His collaborations with innovative writers like Bill Gunn, Colin Higgins, and Robert Towne made his movies stand out during what was already a renaissance of American film. But I believe his background as a silent generation bohemian who grew up during the Great Depression gave Ashby an empathetic perspective from which to channel these unique stories by writers who had such personal connections to their work. This all made coming back to The Holdovers, a movie I already wasn't fond of, a compoundingly disappointing watch. Despite the lengths I've gone through to tear it down, The Holdovers is not a bad movie. It certainly isn't Alexander Payne's worst, but its insistence on being taken seriously as something it unequivocally is not ignites a rage inside of me. Having pored over hours of Payne's interviews, I think he comes off as intellectually antagonistic, despite being a hack.
No, it's not about the actual length, Steve. It's about how it feels while you're watching it.
Oh, got it.
On top of being a baselessly pretentious asshole, Payne is an alleged statutory rapist. Rose McGowan accused him in 2020 of assaulting her and then leaving her on a street corner in front of Tropical Cafe in Silver Lake, where he lived, when she was 15. After Payne denied the allegations, McGowan told Variety, "I want people that have watched his films to know his morals are in your mind. His thoughts have become yours, like in his comedy Election, where the middle-aged teacher that fantasizes having sex with his young student, Reese Witherspoon. I want people to know Hollywood perpetrators show you who they are, their skewed view normalized." These connections can become more apparent in hindsight and often lead to discussions about how or whether we can separate the art from the horrible artist. In Payne's case with The Holdovers or the rest of his oeuvre, there's no need for this debate. His movies aren't even good enough to warrant it. Contrary to what some of the comments on this channel may suggest, I'm not contrarian for the sake of it. I didn't go into this movie wanting to dislike it. I genuinely second-guessed my initial viewing because it was being so lauded by audiences. However, a large part of what makes watching movies so meaningful for me is taking the time to interrogate what doesn't work and why. I think this practice is integral to what it means to be a lover of any medium. The process of writing and rewriting this essay has helped me feel more in touch with my sensibilities and more confident in my initial experience of a movie. Needless to say, I haven't second-guessed myself on this in a long time. So thank you, Alexander Payne. Your references were better than your movie. If you'd like to support this channel further, please like the video, subscribe, and consider becoming a member of our Patreon, linked down below. We've just launched and we'll be providing some fun bonus material, including a poster for the first 50 paid members. Thank y'all for watching this essay. Special thank you to those of you who've now watched it twice. Hopefully it was improved enough to be worth it. Let me know your favorite Christmas movie down in the comments. Mine is Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. I'm not specifically gonna ask you for your favorite 70s movie because I don't think I could give you mine, but feel free to add that too. Don't forget to watch our last essay on The Devil Wears Prada. See you in our next video. If you can, please consider helping my friend Nada, who's just safely delivered a beautiful baby boy named Abdul. Your support will help her family access the resources they need, including epilepsy medication for her husband Ahmed and her daughter Maria. As always, the link to donate is in the description. Thank you.